My name is Joshua. I am 32 years old, and 3 weeks ago, my father looked me in the eye in front of 30 of our closest friends and family and told me I didn't matter. Before I tell you how I brought their perfect world crashing down, take a second to let me know where you are watching from in the comments. I read every single one. To understand why I did what I did, you have to understand the night it all ended. It was my parents' 40th wedding anniversary, the event of the season in our upscale Boston suburb. My mother, Cameron, had been planning this for 6 months. She wanted everything to be perfect. And when my mother wants perfection, that usually means I am not sleeping. The party was held at their house, a sprawling colonial estate that looked like something out of a magazine. The driveway was lined with expensive cars, Mercedes, BMWs, a few Teslas. And then there was my truck, a beat-up Ford from 2008, parked way down the street around the corner, so it wouldn't ruin the aesthetic, as my mother put it. I had arrived at 8 in the morning. I wasn't a guest. I was the workforce. Joshua, the caterers are setting up the tent on the wrong side of the lawn. Fix it. My father, Robert, barked at me before he'd even had his coffee. Joshua, the sound system is buzzing. If the microphone doesn't work for the toasts, I will never forgive you. My mother added, not bothering to look up from her iPad. I spent 10 hours sweating in a suit that was getting tighter by the minute, running cables, arguing with florists, and moving heavy tables because my father didn't want to pay the extra labor fee for the rental company. I was the son, but I was also the free handyman, the IT guy, and the event coordinator. By the time the guests started arriving at 6 p.m., I was exhausted. I retreated to the guest bathroom to splash cold water on my face and try to make myself look presentable. I looked at myself in the mirror. Dark circles under my eyes, a tie that I'd bought at a discount store, and a posture that screamed defeat. Just get through tonight, I told myself. Just get through tonight, and then you can go home and sleep for a week. I walked out into the living room, which was now buzzing with laughter and the clinking of expensive crystal. Waiters were passing around hors d'oeuvres that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. I grabbed a glass of water and stood near the wall trying to blend in. That's what I was good at, blending in, being part of the furniture. Then, the front door swung open, and the energy in the room shifted. "They're here!" my mother shrieked, her face lighting up with a joy she never showed me. In walked my older brother, Elijah, and his wife, Audrey. They looked like they had just stepped off a runway. Elijah was wearing a custom-tailored Italian suit, and Audrey was dripping in diamonds. They had arrived in Elijah's brand-new Porsche Cayenne, which was parked right in the center of the circular driveway, the spot my father usually reserved for himself. "Sorry we're late," Elijah announced, flashing a blinding white smile. Traffic coming out of the city was a nightmare, and Audrey couldn't decide on earrings. The guests laughed. My father walked over and clapped Elijah on the back. "Fashionably late as always, son. Glad you made it. The party hasn't started until the golden boy walks in." I watched from the corner. Nobody asked where I had been all day. Nobody noticed the sweat stains on my shirt collar. I was just the background noise. Elijah's 2 kids, Isaac and Chloe, came running in behind them. They were 7 and 5, and they were wild. They immediately started running circles around the guests, nearly knocking over a waiter with a tray of champagne. "Joshua!" Audrey yelled across the room, snapping her fingers at me. "Grab the kids, will you? They're hyper. We need a drink." She didn't ask. She commanded. I put down my water and intercepted my nephew before he could crash into Mrs. Vanderwall, the neighborhood gossip. "Hey buddy, let's calm down," I said, guiding them toward the playroom. "I don't want to," Isaac screamed, kicking me in the shin. It hurt, but I didn't flinch. I was used to it. I spent the next hour acting as an unpaid babysitter while the rest of the family mingled. I could hear the laughter from the other room. I could hear Elijah bragging about his investments and his portfolio. I knew for a fact Elijah hadn't made a solid investment in 3 years, but that didn't matter. In this house, image was everything. Finally, around 8 p.m., my father tapped his spoon against his champagne glass. The room went silent. Everyone, Thank you, Robert began, his voice booming with practiced charisma. He stood next to my mother, his arm around her waist. They looked like the perfect couple. 40 years. Can you believe it? 40 years of building this life, this family, this legacy. Applause rippled through the room. Cameron and I wanted to do something special to celebrate, he continued. We didn't want gifts. We wanted memories. We realized that the most important thing we have is our family. I felt a small spark of hope in my chest. Family. Maybe, just maybe, this was the turning point. I stepped out of the playroom, standing near the doorway so I could see them. So, my father said, grinning, we have a surprise announcement. Next week, we are taking the entire family to Hawaii. The room erupted. Hawaii. Oh, how wonderful. You deserve it. A week at the Four Seasons in Maui, my mother added, beaming. First-class tickets, private villas, the works. A true family vacation. Elijah let out a whoop of excitement. Maui. Dad, you're the man. I've been needing a break from the grind. Audrey clapped her hands. Oh my God. I need a tan so bad. I stood there, and for the first time in years I smiled. A real smile. Hawaii. I had never been to Hawaii. I had never been anywhere, really. I worked 6 days a week doing freelance accounting and tax preparation, and on the 7th day I was usually fixing something at my parents' house. A week in Maui sounded like heaven. I imagined sitting on a beach, reading a book, with no one yelling my name. I stepped forward, moving out of the shadows. I walked up to the group, feeling a rare sense of belonging. That sounds incredible, Dad, I said, my voice cutting through the chatter. I'll need to let my clients know. What time is our flight next week? I want to make sure I pack the right gear. The room went quiet. Not a comfortable quiet, but the kind of silence that happens when someone drops a glass on a tile floor. My father's smile didn't disappear, but it changed. It became tight, patronizing. He looked at me like I was a child who had interrupted an adult conversation. Joshua, he said, a small chuckle escaping his lips. You don't need to know the flight time. I blinked, confused. What? Why not? If we're leaving next week, I need to book the airport parking and… You're not coming, son, Robert said. He said it loudly. He said it clearly. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. The air left my lungs. I'm not coming. Of course not. My mother chimed in, her voice dripping with that fake sweetness she used when she was being cruel. Someone has to stay behind. Stay behind. I repeated, my voice trembling slightly. Well, look around, Joshua, my father said, gesturing to the room. Elijah and Audrey need a break. A real break. They can't relax if they're chasing Isaac and Chloe around the beach all day. And your mother and I are too old to be running after toddlers. He took a sip of his champagne. You're staying here. You're going to watch the kids. You'll stay at the house with them while we're gone. It's better this way. You're great with them. And honestly, you don't really fit in at the Four Seasons, do you? 30 pairs of eyes were on me. I saw pity in some, amusement in others. Elijah was smirking, swirling his drink. Audrey looked bored, checking her nails. So, I stammered, fighting the heat rising in my face. You're taking the whole family to Hawaii. Except me? I'm just the babysitter. Don't be dramatic, Joshua, my mother snapped, her smile vanishing. You're not just a babysitter. You're helping the family. Besides, it's not like you have anything important going on. Your little tax business can wait. And it's not like you have a wife or anyone waiting for you. That was the dagger. The reminder that I was single, that I was alone, that in their eyes my time had zero value. You should be grateful we're trusting you with the house and the grandchildren, my father added, dismissing me. Now let's make a toast. To Maui. To Maui. The guests echoed, raising their glasses. They turned their backs on me. Just like that, I stood there in the middle of the room, holding my empty water glass, realizing that I wasn't a son to them. I was staff, and I wasn't even paid staff. My hands were shaking so hard I thought the glass would shatter. Couldn't breathe. I needed to get out of there. I turned around and walked straight into the kitchen, the laughter from the living room chasing me like a pack of wolves. I leaned against the granite countertop, trying to steady my heart rate. I felt sick, humiliated, used. Joshua. I looked up. It was Uncle Thomas, my mother's younger brother. He was the black sheep of the family because he had moved to California 20 years ago to become a potter. He was the only one who ever looked at me with kindness. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. "I'm fine, Uncle Thomas," I lied, turning away to hide the tears threatening to spill. "Just thirsty." He sighed. "They shouldn't have done that. It was cruel." "It's fine," I said again, my voice hardening. "They're right. I don't fit in at the Four Seasons." Thomas put a hand on my shoulder. "You know you're worth 10 of them, right? Don't let them make you believe otherwise." He squeezed my shoulder and went back to the party. He couldn't stay away too long or my mother would start making comments about his lifestyle. I was alone in the kitchen. I started aggressively loading the dishwasher, just to do something with my hands. That's when I heard a ping. It was my mother's iPad, sitting on the charging dock near the coffee maker. It lit up with a notification. I knew I shouldn't look. I knew it was an invasion of privacy. But I was angry. I was hurting. And something in my gut told me to look. I walked over and tapped the screen. She hadn't set a passcode for the lock screen timeout yet. It opened right up to her email app. What I saw there changed everything. Before I tell you what was in that email, you need to understand that this wasn't a one-time thing. This was my life. For 32 years, I had been the invisible son. Growing up, it was always about Elijah. Elijah was the star athlete. Elijah was the prom king. Elijah got into the Ivy League school. I was just Joshua, the quiet one. The one who got good grades but didn't make the honor roll. The one who liked to take apart radios and fix them while Elijah was out partying. I remember my 16th birthday. My parents handed me the keys to the family's old station wagon. It had 150,000 miles on it and smelled like wet dog. I was grateful, truly. But 2 years later, when Elijah turned 16, a brand new BMW appeared in the driveway with a red bow on it. "Elijah needs a reliable car for his image," my father had explained when I asked why. "He's going places, Joshua. You understand." I understood. I always understood. I was the safety net. Elijah was the trapeze artist. The dynamic never changed as we became adults. I became an accountant because my father said it was sensible, and they needed someone to handle their complex tax returns. I built a modest freelance business. I paid my own bills. I drove a used truck I bought with my own money. Meanwhile, Elijah floated from job to job, always consulting or networking. Yet, he lived in a condo my parents paid for, drove cars my parents leased, and wore watches that cost more than my annual income. 3 years ago, I thought I had found a way out. I met a woman named Sarah. She was smart, funny, and she saw me. We dated for 2 years. I was going to propose. But then came the incident with the roof. My parents' roof started leaking during a storm. Instead of calling a contractor, my father called me. It was Sarah's birthday dinner. I was about to give her the necklace I had saved up for. "Joshua, get over here now," my dad had demanded over the phone. "Water is coming into the master bedroom." "Dad, it's Sarah's birthday," I had pleaded. "Call a roofer. I'll pay for it." "A roofer will take 3 hours. We need you now. Family comes first, Joshua. Unless you don't care about this house that will eventually be your inheritance." That word, inheritance. They dangled it over me like a carrot on a stick. I left the dinner. I went to fix the roof in the pouring rain. When I got back to the restaurant, wet and shivering, Sarah was gone. She broke up with me the next day. "I love you, Joshua," she had said, her eyes sad. "But I can't be with a man who is married to his parents. You're not their son. You're their servant. And you're too afraid to resign." Her words haunted me. You're their servant. After Sarah left, I felt like I had nothing. I fell into a depression I couldn't shake. That's when I picked up the camera. I had found an old Canon DSLR at a garage sale. I started walking around the city at night when I couldn't sleep. I took photos of the things people walked past without seeing. A single flower growing out of a crack in the pavement. The tired, lined face of a janitor smoking a cigarette on his break. The way the streetlights reflected in a puddle of oil. Photography became my secret world. Nobody in my family knew. If I told them, my mother would have laughed and asked how much money it made. My father would have told me to stop wasting time and focus on finding more tax clients. I started posting the photos online under a pseudonym, The Silent Observer. I didn't expect anyone to care. But slowly, people started to notice. I gained followers. Real comments from people who said my photos made them feel something. That's how I reconnected with Uncle Thomas. I saw he was following my account. I sent him a DM, terrified. Uncle Thomas, it's me, Joshua. He didn't out me. He didn't tell my parents. He became my mentor. He critiqued my work, encouraged me, and told me I had a gift for seeing the truth. 6 months ago, Thomas introduced me via email to a man named Mason, a gallery owner in San Francisco. Mason loved my work. He said it was raw and unapologetic. He wanted to feature me in an upcoming exhibition titled Shadows in the Light. I had been putting him off. I was scared. Scared of failing. Scared of my parents finding out. Scared of stepping into the light. But standing in that kitchen, listening to the party I was excluded from, thinking about how they expected me to play nanny for a week while they sipped my ties. Something snapped. I looked down at the iPad. The email notification was still there. It was a thread between my mother and Elijah. Subject, Hawaii Logistics/Joshua. I tapped it. I read the email chain, my breath catching in my throat. It started with Elijah. From Elijah to Mom date. Yesterday, 10:14 a.m. Mom. Seriously. Audrey is freaking out about the nanny costs for Maui. The agency wants $300 a day plus overtime because the kids are high energy. That's like $2,500 we could use for shopping. Can't we just leave the kids with Joshua? He doesn't have a life anyway. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. He doesn't have a life anyway. My mother's reply was underneath. From Mom to Elijah date. Yesterday, 11:30 a.m. Way ahead of you, honey. I already planned on it. I'm going to tell him at the party. He'll do it. He always does. It's free labor. Why pay a stranger when we have Joshua? Plus, I need him to stay at the house. The basement sump pump has been acting up and the weatherman says it's going to rain all week. I need someone there to bail water if it floods. I'm not paying a plumber emergency rates when Joshua can do it. Free labor. Bail water. I scrolled down to Elijah's final response. From Elijah to Mom date. Yesterday, 11:45 a.m. Perfect. You're a genius, Mom. Make sure you spin it so he thinks he's helping family. He eats that stuff up. Just don't tell him about the basement until we're at the airport, or he might whine. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. My hands weren't shaking anymore. They were perfectly still. A cold, hard rage settled in my chest, heavier and more solid than anything I had ever felt before. It wasn't just that they didn't love me. It was that they actively held contempt for me. They mocked me. They planned around my compliance like I was a broken appliance they kept in the garage because it was still technically useful. I took my phone out of my pocket. I snapped photos of the entire email thread. Every single word. Then, I saw another attachment in a separate email from Elijah to my father, titled Bank Statement. I shouldn't have opened it, but I was past the point of caring about ethics. It was a bank statement for a joint account Elijah managed for my parents' investments. I glanced at the numbers. There were massive withdrawals, casino transfers, luxury car lease payments. Elijah was stealing from them. He was bleeding them dry. For a second, I thought about rushing into the living room and showing them. Look at your golden boy. He's a thief. But then I stopped. Why? Why should I save them? If I told them, they wouldn't believe me. They would say I doctored the photos. They would say I was jealous. They would find a way to blame me. No, I was done fixing things. I was done being the roof patcher, the tax filer, the secret keeper. I put the iPad back on the dock exactly how I found it. I walked out of the kitchen. I didn't go back to the party. I walked out the back door, through the garden I had landscaped for them last summer, and around the block to my truck. I sat in the driver's seat and gripped the steering wheel. I looked at the house glowing in the night. It looked like a castle built on lies. I started the engine. It rumbled to life, a rough, loud sound that felt comforting. I drove to my small apartment on the other side of town. Took me 20 minutes. I didn't turn on the radio. I drove in silence, my mind racing. When I got home, I didn't sit down. I grabbed my suitcase. I packed my clothes. Not the suits my mother liked, but my jeans, my flannels, my comfortable boots. I packed my laptop. I packed my hard drives. And most importantly, I packed my camera gear. My lenses, my tripods, my filters. The tools of my real life. I looked around my apartment. I rented it month to month because I was always afraid to commit to a lease in case my parents needed me to move closer. I sat down at my desk and wrote a check for the next month's rent. I put it in an envelope for the landlord with a note. Moving out immediately. Keep the deposit. Then, I pulled out my phone. It was 11 p.m. I dialed a number I had only ever texted. Hello. A voice answered on the second ring. It was Mason, the gallery owner. Mason, it's Joshua, I said. Is that offer for the exhibition still open? There was a pause. Joshua? It's 8 p.m. here. Yes, the offer is open. But the opening is in 3 days. You said you weren't ready. I'm ready, I said. I'm coming. I'm leaving Boston tonight. Tonight? Mason sounded surprised but excited. Okay. Get here. We have a lot of work to do. Do you have a place to stay? I'll figure it out, I said. Nonsense. Thomas has a guest room. He's been waiting for this call for years. I hung up. I felt lighter. I carried my bags to the truck. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Audrey. Audrey, where did you go? The kids need to be put to bed. We're trying to open gifts. Get back here. I looked at the text. I didn't reply. I drove back to my parents' house one last time. It was past midnight now. The party was winding down. The caterers were packing up. I parked on the street. I walked up the driveway with a single key in my hand. The key to their house. The key I had used to let myself in to fix their boiler, to walk their dog, to stock their fridge. I walked up to the front door. I didn't go in. I slipped the key under the welcome mat. I took a piece of paper from my pocket. I had written a note. It wasn't angry. It wasn't long. It just said, I resign. I slipped the note under the door. Then, I got back in my truck. I put it in gear. I looked at the rearview mirror. I saw the lights of the house one last time. Good luck with the basement, I whispered. I hit the gas. I didn't head back to my apartment. I headed west, toward I-90, toward California. I drove through the night. The further I got from Boston, the easier it was to breathe. The drive was a blur of asphalt and caffeine. I drove until my eyes burned. New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio. I stopped only for gas and cheap diner coffee. There is a specific kind of freedom in being on the road when you have nowhere to return to. For the first time in my life, nobody knew where I was. I was a ghost. Back in Boston, the bomb had detonated. I knew this because my phone began to self-destruct around 7 a.m. the next morning. I was somewhere in Indiana when the first call came in. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. Then my father. Then Elijah. Then Audrey. My phone screen was lighting up like a Christmas tree. Missed call. Mom, 3. Missed call. Dad, 2. Missed call. Elijah, 5. Then came the texts. Mom, where are you? The kids are awake and hungry. Mom, Joshua, stop playing games. Get here now. Elijah, you better be dead or in the hospital. We have a flight at 2 p.m. Who is watching the kids? Dad. This is unacceptable behavior. Pick up the phone. I pulled over at a rest stop to stretch my legs. I sat on the hood of my truck, eating a granola bar, and watched the messages roll in. It was like watching a reality show about people I used to know. By 10 a.m., the tone shifted from angry to panicked. "Mom, Joshua, please. The limo is coming in an hour. We can't find your key. Audrey, do not do this to me. I packed for a vacation, not for childcare." I laughed. A dry, rasping laugh. They weren't worried about me. They weren't asking if I was safe. They were worried about who was going to make peanut butter sandwiches for Isaac and Chloe. I finally turned my phone off. I tossed it onto the passenger seat. I imagined the scene, the chaos. My mother screaming at my father to do something. Elijah realizing he might actually have to parent his children. The scrambling to find a last-minute nanny agency that wouldn't blacklist them. I found out later from Uncle Thomas exactly what happened. They missed their flight. My father had tried to call a car service to take them to the airport, but because I hadn't booked the usual one, my job, everything was booked up. They had to take 2 Ubers. They got to Logan Airport late. They missed the flight to Maui. They had to pay exorbitant fees to rebook for the next day. And because they couldn't find a nanny on such short notice, they had to take the kids with them. All 4 of them. In one villa, with rain in the forecast. Meanwhile, I was crossing the Mississippi River. I arrived in San Francisco 3 days later. I was unshaven, exhausted, and smelling of road dust, but I felt alive. I pulled up to the address Uncle Thomas had given me. It was a beautiful, small house in the Berkeley Hills, surrounded by trees. Thomas was waiting on the porch. He looked older than I remembered, his hair grayer, but his smile was the same. "You made it," he said, walking down the steps. I got out of the truck. My legs felt like jelly. "I made it." He hugged me, a real hug, not the stiff pat on the back my father gave. "Mason is expecting us at the gallery in an hour," Thomas said, helping me with my bags. "Go shower. You smell like a trucker." I showered, shaved, and put on the only clean shirt I had left. We drove into the city to Mason's gallery. It was in a trendy district, surrounded by coffee shops and art studios. The sign on the window read, "The Glass House Gallery." Inside, it was stark white and elegant. And there, on the walls, were my photos. I stopped dead in my tracks. They were huge, printed on metal, framed in minimalist black wood. The photo of the flower in the pavement. The portrait of the janitor. A shot of a homeless woman sharing her sandwich with a stray dog. They looked real. They looked like art. "Joshua," a voice boomed. A tall man with eccentric glasses and a linen scarf walked toward me. "Mason." "The silent observer speaks," Mason said, extending a hand. "It is an honor. Truly." I can't believe this," I whispered, looking around. "Believe it," Mason said. "We've already had inquiries. People are connecting with this work, Joshua. It's haunting. It's about being unseen. And sadly, a lot of people know what that feels like." He walked me to a display in the center of the room. It was my bio, but it didn't say Joshua Dixon. It just said, "The Silent Observer." "We kept the anonymity for now," Mason explained. "Adds to the mystique. But for the opening night, are you ready to reveal yourself?" I looked at the photo of the janitor. I looked at the dignity in his eyes. "Yes," I said. "My name is Joshua Dixon, and I'm a photographer." The next 2 months were a blur of work and transformation. I wasn't Joshua the accountant anymore. I was Joshua the artist. I lived in Thomas's guest room, but I spent every waking hour at the gallery or in the studio Mason set up for me. I learned about printing, about lighting, about the business of art. I learned that my opinion mattered. When I said a frame should be matte instead of glossy, Mason listened. "You have an eye, Joshua," he would say. "Trust it." I started to stand taller. I bought clothes that fit me. I stopped apologizing for taking up space. Meanwhile, back in Boston, my family's life was unraveling. I had turned my phone back on, but I blocked their numbers. I only communicated through email and only briefly. From Dad's subject, "Taxes, Joshua. This is ridiculous. Come home immediately." The corporate tax deadline is approaching and I can't find the files for the LLC. Elijah needs you to sign off on his K-1 forms. Stop acting like a child. I didn't reply. I knew why he was panicking. I was the only one who knew how to navigate the labyrinth of deductions and loopholes they used to keep their wealth intact. Without me, they would have to hire a forensic accountant, and a forensic accountant would ask questions. Questions about Elijah's consulting fees. Questions about the business trips to Vegas. I heard snippets of their disaster vacation from a cousin who commented on my Facebook, before I blocked him too. Apparently, it rained in Maui for 6 straight days. Isaac got an ear infection. Audrey got food poisoning. And because I wasn't there to entertain the kids, Elijah and Audrey actually had to parent. They fought constantly. My mother spent the whole trip complaining to the hotel manager. When they got back, they found the basement flooded with 6 inches of water. Mold had started to grow up the drywall. Karma isn't always instant, but when it hits hard. But they didn't learn. They didn't reflect. They just got angrier. They needed someone to blame, and I was the designated target. About 6 weeks after I left, I was in the gallery hanging a new piece for the upcoming grand opening. Mason walked in looking worried. "Joshua, do you know a guy named Gabriel?" My stomach dropped. Gabriel was an old friend of Elijah's. A snake in a suit. "Yeah, I know him." "Why?" "He was in here yesterday, buying a print for his office. He recognized your style. He asked a lot of questions about the artist. I didn't tell him anything, but he saw me," I realized. I was in the back office. "Maybe," Mason said. 2 days later, I got an email from Elijah. Subject: "We know where you are, nice try. Hiding in San Francisco. Gabriel saw you. You're playing artist? That's cute. Dad is furious about the tax audit notice we just got. We are coming to get you. We have flights booked for next week. You are going to come home. Fix this mess with the IRS and apologize to Mom. Don't think you can run from us." My heart hammered against my ribs. Audit. The IRS was auditing them. Of course they were. I hadn't filed their extensions. I hadn't cleaned up Elijah's messy expenses. They were coming. The whole pack. "Let them come," Thomas said when I showed him the email. We were sitting on his porch, drinking tea. "They're going to ruin the opening," I said, panic rising. "They'll make a scene. They'll humiliate me in front of Mrs. Gray." Mrs. Gray was our VIP guest. A billionaire philanthropist and one of the biggest art collectors on the West Coast. Mason had been working for months to get her to attend. "Let them come," Thomas repeated firmly. "You are not the same man who left Boston, Joshua. You have built a castle here. They are just tourists." He was right. I looked at my hands. They were stained with printer ink. They were the hands of a creator, not a servant. "Okay," I said. "Let them come." The night of the opening, shadows in the light, the gallery was packed. Waiters circulated with trays of champagne. Real champagne, not the cheap stuff my father tried to pass off at parties. The lighting was dim and atmospheric. A string quartet played softly in the corner. I wore a charcoal suit that Mason had helped me pick out. Fit perfectly. I felt powerful. Mrs. Gray arrived at 8 p.m. She was a tiny woman in her 70s with sharp eyes and a cane topped with a silver hawk. She walked straight to my centerpiece, a large-format photograph of a solitary lighthouse battling a storm. "This," she said, pointing with her cane, "this captures loneliness, but also resilience. Who is the artist?" "I am, ma'am," I said, stepping forward. "Joshua Dixon." She looked me up and down. "You have an old soul, Mr. Dixon. I like it." We were deep in conversation about composition when the front door slammed open. The chatter in the room died down. There they were, the Dixon clan, my father in his trench coat, looking like a storm cloud, my mother, clutching her Chanel bag like a weapon, Elijah, looking disheveled and frantic, Audrey, trailing behind, looking around the room with disdain. They spotted me immediately. "Joshua!" my mother shrieked. Her voice cut through the sophisticated atmosphere like a chainsaw. Mason stepped forward, signaling the security guard to wait. He wanted to see how I handled this. My parents marched over to me, pushing past a group of potential buyers. "So this is where you've been hiding?" My father spat, his face red. "Playing dress-up? Do you have any idea what you've done to this family?" "Hello, Dad." "Hello, Mom," I said calmly. My pulse was racing, but my voice was steady. "Don't you hello me," Elijah yelled, stepping into my personal space. He smelled of airport whiskey. "The IRS is crawling up my back because of you. You didn't sign the K-1s. You didn't file the extensions." "That sounds like a personal problem, Elijah," I said. "I don't work for you. You work for this family," my mother screamed. "We raised you. We fed you. And you abandon us to. She waved her hand at the art on the walls. "To take pictures of garbage?" She pointed at a photo of a rusted car in a field. "This is what you left us for? Pictures of trash? You are pathetic, Joshua. You are an embarrassment." The room was deadly silent. Everyone was watching. Mrs. Gray was watching. "This is a joke," Audrey sneered. "Come on, Joshua. Pack your little toys. We have a red-eye flight back to Boston tonight. You can sleep on the plane. You have work to do tomorrow." My father grabbed my arm. His grip was hard. "Let's go. Now." I looked at his hand on my sleeve. Then I looked at his face. For the first time, I didn't see a giant. I saw a small, angry, frightened old man. I pulled my arm away. Sharp. Definitive. "Don't touch me," I said. My father blinked, stunned. I had never pulled away before. "I'm not going anywhere," I announced, raising my voice so everyone could hear. "I am not your accountant. I am not your handyman. And I am certainly not your servant. You are nothing without us," Elijah shouted. "You're a loser with a camera." "Is that so?" A voice interrupted. It was Mrs. Gray. She stepped between me and my family. She wasn't tall, but she commanded the room. "Excuse me," she said to my father. "Who are you?" "I'm his father," Robert said, puffed up. "And this is a family matter." "Well, Mr. Father," Mrs. Gray said, her voice dripping with ice, "you seem to be under a misconception. You called this art garbage. You called this man a loser." She turned to the crowd. "I have just purchased the entire Silent Observer collection for my private museum." Gasps rippled through the room. My mother's eyes went wide. "For $50,000, Mrs. Gray added casually. "As a down payment. The final valuation is pending, but likely double that." $50,000. You could hear a pin drop. Elijah's mouth fell open. My father looked like he was having a stroke. That's impossible," my mother stammered. "For 4 photos?" "For art," Mrs. Gray corrected. "And clearly, you wouldn't know art if it bit you." My father tried to recover. He forced a smile that looked painful. "Well, that's impressive. See, I always knew the boy had talent. We're proud of him." "Proud?" I laughed. It was a dark sound. "Proud." I pulled out my phone. "Mason, can you put this on the projector?" Mason grinned. "With pleasure." I airplayed the screenshot of the email to the large screen behind me. The one from the anniversary party. The text was 10 feet tall. From Mom, he's free labor. From Elijah, he doesn't have a life anyway. The crowd read it. Murmurs of disgust filled the room. Disgusting. How could a mother say that? My mother went pale. She looked at the screen, then at the crowd, then at me. We didn't mean," she stuttered. "You meant every word," I said. "You wanted me to bail water out of your basement while you went to Hawaii. You wanted me to commit tax fraud for Elijah. You never wanted a son. You wanted a slave." I took a step toward them. They actually shrank back. "Get out," I said. "Joshua, please." My father tried, his voice trembling. "Let's talk about this. $50,000. We need to discuss how to invest." I said, "Get out." I roared. The sound came from deep in my chest, 32 years of silence breaking all at once. Security guards moved in. Mason gestured to the door. "You heard the artist," Mason said. "Leave, before I call the police." Elijah looked at me with pure hatred, but also fear. He knew his tax shield was gone. Audrey was already walking to the door, trying to hide her face from the people filming with their phones. My mother started to cry, but nobody moved to comfort her. My father looked at me one last time, searching for the obedient boy he used to own. He didn't find him. They turned and walked out, surrounded by the judgmental whispers of the strangers they had tried to impress. I stood there, my heart pounding, watching the door close behind them. Mrs. Gray touched my arm. "Well done, Joshua." I took a deep breath. The air tasted sweet. "Thank you," I said. "This is the moment that changed everything. The moment I finally took control of my life. Thank you so much for listening this far. You are amazing. Please hit that like button and comment number 1 below so I know you've been with me on this journey. It helps more people find this story, and it tells me that my experience means something to you. Your support is the biggest motivation for me to share what happened next, because trust me, the fallout was just beginning. The heavy oak door of the gallery clicked shut, sealing my family outside in the cold San Francisco night. Inside, the air felt different. The tension that had gripped the room moments before dissipated, replaced by a buzzing, electric energy. It was the sound of shock, yes, but also of validation. Mrs. Gray was the first to break the spell. She turned to me, her silver hawk cane tapping rhythmically on the polished floor. "Mr. Dixon," she said, her voice carrying a warmth I wasn't used to. "I apologize for the interruption. Family drama is usually reserved for the opera, not art openings. But I must say, you handled that with remarkable poise." "I apologize to you, Mrs. Gray," I replied, my adrenaline still spiking, making my hands tremble slightly. "I didn't want my personal life to overshadow the work." She laughed, a sharp, clear sound. "Overshadow? Joshua, look around you. That outburst just gave your work context. It gave it teeth. Before, these were beautiful photographs of overlooked people. Now the audience knows the man behind the lens knows exactly what it feels like to be invisible. You didn't just sell art tonight. You sold a story. And people pay a premium for authenticity." She was right. The guests weren't leaving. In fact, they were crowding closer. The whispers weren't judgmental anymore. They were reverent. People wanted to shake my hand. They wanted to know about the woman at the bus stop, the janitor in the alley. They looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and respect that felt intoxicating. Mason pulled me aside about 20 minutes later, handing me a glass of scotch. He looked like he had just run a marathon and won. "Do you have any idea what just happened?" he hissed, grinning ear to ear. "We didn't just sell the Gray collection. We sold out. The red dots are going up on every piece. Joshua, you're not just a debut artist anymore. You're a sensation." I took a sip of the scotch. It burned, grounding me. "I need air," I said. "Just a minute. I need to breathe." "Go out the back," Mason advised. "The front is swarming with people wanting to talk to you." I shook my head. "I need to go out the front. I need to make sure they're gone." I walked to the front door and pushed it open. The night air was cool and smelled of sea salt and exhaust. I stepped onto the sidewalk, expecting to see an empty street. I was wrong. They were still there. In the parking lot adjacent to the gallery, under the harsh yellow glow of a street lamp, the Dixon family was imploding. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion. I stood in the shadows of the gallery awning, unseen, just the way I used to be. But this time, I wasn't watching from the sidelines because I wasn't allowed to play. I was watching because I had chosen to leave the game. Elijah was pacing frantically next to their rental car, a generic sedan that looked nothing like the Porsche he drove back home. His tie was undone, his face slick with sweat. My father was leaning against the hood, clutching his chest, while my mother stood frozen, staring at nothing. Audrey was screaming. "You said it was handled." Audrey's voice was shrill, echoing off the brick walls of the nearby buildings. You told me the IRS letter was a mistake. You told me the money in the joint account was moved to a high-yield trust. It was. Elijah shouted back, his voice cracking. I moved it. It's tied up right now. Liquid assets. Audrey, you don't understand finance. I understand math, Elijah, she screamed. I tried to use the debit card at the hotel this morning and it was declined. Declined. For a coffee. Where is the money? My father straightened up, his face gray. Elijah? What is she talking about? What money? Elijah stopped pacing. He looked cornered. A trapped animal. Dad, look, the market has been volatile. I made some leverage plays. High risk, high reward. I was trying to double your retirement fund. I was trying to help. Double it? My father's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried across the lot. You told me that account was for the grandkids' college fund. You told me it was safe bonds. I needed capital. Elijah exploded, throwing his hands up. Do you have any idea how expensive it is to be me? To be the son you wanted? The car lease is $2,000 a month. The country club membership. The private school tuition for Isaac and Chloe. You wanted the image, Dad. You wanted the golden boy. Well, gold is expensive. I watched, stunned. I knew Elijah was stealing, but I didn't realize the extent of it. He hadn't just skimmed off the top. He had drained them. The college fund. The inheritance. The retirement. How much? My mother asked. She had finally snapped out of her trance. Her voice was flat, dead. How much is gone, Elijah? Elijah looked at his shoes. He mumbled something. Look at me, my mother screeched. It was the same demon voice she used to use on me when I didn't clean the gutters fast enough. How much? Everything, Elijah whispered. It's all gone. The liquidity is gone. I owe some people. The bookies. The investors. It's a mess, Mom. But I can fix it. I just need Joshua to sign the K-1s, backdate the losses, and we can claim a massive deduction. That's why we're here. If he signs, the IRS backs off and I get a refund check that covers the debt. It's a bridge loan, basically. He looked toward the gallery door, his eyes wild with desperation. We have to get him back out here. We have to force him. Dad, go in there. Tell him you're having a heart attack. He's soft. He'll come out. My stomach turned. Even now, at the absolute bottom of the pit, his strategy was to manipulate my empathy. He didn't see me as a brother. He saw me as a signature. He saw me as a tool to fix his broken life. My father looked at the gallery door. Then he looked at Elijah. For the first time in 35 years, the blinders fell off. He saw his golden boy for what he really was, a fraud, parasite. He's not coming out, Elijah, my father said, his voice breaking. And even if he did, why would he help you, after what we just did? Because he's family, Elijah screamed. Because that's what he does. He fixes things. No, I said. I hadn't realized I'd spoken aloud, or maybe I had stepped out of the shadows. They all turned to look at me. I stood under the awning, bathed in the warm light of the gallery, while they stood in the cold darkness of the parking lot. Joshua, Elijah breathed. He took a step toward me, putting on that fake, charming smile that used to work on everyone. Josh, buddy, you heard? Look, I'm in a jam. A real jam. I know we said some harsh things, but we're brothers. Blood, right? I just need a signature. 5 minutes. You sign the papers and I swear, I'll never ask you for anything again. I'll give you the Porsche. Seriously. Take the lease. I looked at him. I looked at the brother who had mocked my truck, who had laughed when I was told to stay behind. The Porsche isn't yours to give, Elijah, I said calmly. It belongs to the bank. Just like the house will soon. Don't be like that, Elijah snarled, his mask slipping. You think you're better than us because you sold some pictures? You're still just the accountant. You know the tax code. You know how to make this go away. If I go down, Mom and Dad go down too. They co-signed the loans, Joshua. Do you want to see them on the street? It was a low blow, a classic hostage tactic, using my parents as human shields. I looked at my parents. My mother was weeping silently into her hands. My father looked like he had aged 20 years in 20 minutes. They looked pathetic, small, defeated. Part of me, the old part, the part that wanted to be a good son, screamed at me to help. Just one signature. Just fix it one last time. Save them. But then I remembered the email. Free labor. He doesn't have a life anyway. I remembered the roof. I remembered Sarah. I remembered 32 years of being invisible until they needed something. I can't help you, I said. My voice was steady, clearer than it had ever been. Not because I'm angry, but because I'm done. I resigned, remember? Joshua, please. My mother sobbed, taking a step forward. We made a mistake. Terrible mistake. We see that now. You were the only one holding this family together. I know, I said. And that was the problem. You didn't want a son. You wanted glue. You wanted mortar to hold up your cracking walls. I looked at my father. You should call a lawyer, Dad. A criminal defense lawyer for Elijah and a bankruptcy lawyer for yourself. And I suggest you do it before the IRS freezes your remaining assets. You're turning your back on us? My father whispered. After everything? No, Dad, I said, turning back toward the warmth of the gallery. I'm turning my face toward my life. I walked back inside and locked the door. Through the glass, I watched them for another minute. Audrey was getting into an Uber alone, leaving Elijah screaming at the sky. My parents stood there, two old people in a dark parking lot, realizing that the retirement they had planned, the Hawaii trips, the country club dinners, was gone. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt free. The weight I had been carrying since I was a child, the weight of their expectations and their failures, was finally gone. The fallout happened fast, just as I predicted. 2 weeks after the gallery opening, I received a notification from a colleague back in Boston. The news had hit the local papers. Prominent banking family in financial scandal. The article detailed everything. The IRS audit had triggered a chain reaction. It turned out Elijah hadn't just gambled away their savings. He had been running a Ponzi-like scheme with his consulting clients, using new investors to pay off old debts. When the market dipped and the liquidity dried up, the whole thing collapsed. Because my father had co-signed everything, trying to prop up his golden boy's image, he was liable. They lost the house. The sprawling colonial estate with the manicured lawn and the flooded basement was seized by the bank. They had to auction off the furniture, the crystal, the art, what little real art they had. Elijah was indicted on 3 counts of wire fraud and embezzlement. Audrey filed for divorce immediately, seeking full custody of Isaac and Chloe. She claimed she knew nothing about the fraud, painting herself as a victim, though I knew she had enjoyed every penny of that stolen luxury. My parents were forced to move into a small 2-bedroom apartment in a less desirable part of town. The country club membership was revoked. The friends who had cheered at their anniversary party disappeared the moment the scandal broke. It was a tragedy, a complete Greek tragedy of hubris and downfall. And I watched it all from 3,000 miles away. I didn't intervene. I didn't send money. I didn't offer to testify. I blocked the number of the lawyer Elijah tried to hire, who kept calling me to ask for character references. I had my own life to build. Mrs. Gray's purchase had opened doors I didn't even know existed. A prestigious publisher approached me to turn the Invisible Sun series into a coffee table book. Magazines wanted interviews. Galleries in New York and London reached out. I was busy. I was working. But this time I was working for myself. Every dollar I earned went into my own account. Every hour I spent was on my own passion. One afternoon, about 6 months after the explosion, I was sitting in a cafe in Sausalito, editing photos for my book. My phone buzzed. It was an email. From Robert Dixon. Subject. No subject. I hesitated. My thumb hovered over the delete button. But curiosity won out. I opened it. There was no text in the body of the email. Just an attachment. A photo. It was a picture taken with a cell phone, blurry and poorly lit. It showed the inside of their new apartment. It was cramped. There was cheap beige carpet. In the corner, sitting on a folding card table, was a copy of a magazine. It was the art magazine with my face on the cover. Underneath the photo, my father had typed one single line, "I wish we had seen you sooner." I stared at the screen. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a request for money. It was an admission of regret. It was the realization that they had bet on the wrong horse. And now, at the end of their race, they were left with nothing but a picture of the winner they had chased away. I didn't reply. I closed the laptop. I took a sip of my coffee, looked out at the bay, and watched a sailboat catch the wind. A year goes by faster than you think when you aren't dreading every sunrise. I am writing this from a balcony in Paris. The iron railing is cold under my hands, and the smell of fresh baguettes and diesel fumes drifts up from the street below. It's a cliché, I know, the artist in Paris, but for a man who spent 30 years in a basement in Boston doing tax returns, clichés feel like miracles. My life today is unrecognizable from the life I left behind. My book, Invisible No More, spent 6 weeks on the bestseller list. The critics called it a haunting meditation on neglect and dignity. I toured 5 cities. I stood on stages and told my story, not the scandalous details of my family, but the emotional truth of being unseen. I looked into the faces of strangers and saw tears. I realized that my family wasn't unique. There are millions of Joshuas out there, the fixers, the scapegoats, the ones who set themselves on fire to keep others warm. I have a new circle now. Not connections or networking contacts, but friends. Real friends. There's Mason, of course, who yells at me when I undervalue my work. There's Uncle Thomas, who visits me whenever he can, bringing clay from California to show me his new glazes. And there's Elena. Elena is a curator at the Musée d'Orsay. We met when she hosted my exhibition in Europe. She's fiery, intelligent, and kind. On our second date, her car broke down. My instinct, my trauma response, kicked in immediately. I jumped out, popped the hood, and started frantically trying to fix the alternator, apologizing profusely as if it were my fault the car had died. Elena stopped me. She put her hand on my grease-stained arm. "Joshua," she said softly. "Stop. I can fix it," I stammered. "I just need a wrench and—" "We can call a tow truck," she said. "I didn't invite you out to be my mechanic. I invited you out because I want to know what you think about Monet." I froze. I looked at her. She wasn't looking at my utility. She was looking at me. "Oh," I said, the tension draining from my shoulders. I think Monet was obsessed with light because he was afraid of the dark." She smiled. "Tell me more." That was the moment I knew I had truly escaped. I wasn't the servant anymore. I was a partner. But the past has a way of echoing, even across an ocean. Last week, I received a legal packet in the mail. It was from a probate lawyer back in Massachusetts. It wasn't about an inheritance. There was nothing left to inherit. It was a notification regarding the sale of my parents' assets to cover the IRS debt and the civil judgments from Elijah's fraud victims. The document listed the items being auctioned. Item 402, grandfather clock. Item 403, set of Waterford crystal, incomplete. Item 404, 2018 Porsche Cayenne, repossessed. And then, at the bottom of the list, item 410, box of assorted personal electronics and cameras. My heart stopped. My old cameras. The ones I had left in the attic years ago. The ones I learned on. The ones that held the first photos I ever took. They were selling everything. They were scrubbing the slate clean, forced by the courts to liquidate every memory to pay for the sins of the golden child. I picked up the phone and called the lawyer. "I want to bid on item 410, I said. "The auction is closed, Mr. Dixon," the lawyer said, sounding tired. However, that item didn't receive any bids. It was marked for disposal. "I'll buy it," I said. "I'll pay for the shipping to Paris." "For a box of junk?" "It's not junk," I said. "It's history." When the box arrived 3 days ago, I opened it with trembling hands. It smelled like the attic of the old house, dust and cedar. Inside were my old film cameras, lenses scratched but functional. And at the very bottom, buried under a tangle of cables, was a photo album. It wasn't one of the perfect, curated albums my mother used to keep on the coffee table to show guests. It was a cheap drugstore album. I opened it. The photos inside were terrible. Blurry, off-center, thumb over the lens. They were photos taken by me when I was 7 or 8 years old. But it wasn't the quality that made me cry. It was the subjects. There was a photo of Elijah, sleeping on the couch with his mouth open. There was a photo of my dad, trying to fix the lawnmower and looking confused. There was a photo of my mom, laughing, actually laughing, with no makeup on, holding a garden hose. I realized then that I had always been the observer. Even as a child, while they were busy posing and pretending to be perfect, I was the one seeing them as they really were. Flawed, human, messy. I had spent my whole life waiting for them to see me. But the truth was, I was the only one who had ever truly seen them. I closed the album. I didn't hate them anymore. I didn't forgive them. Some things, like the cruelty of that anniversary dinner, aren't meant to be forgiven, only survived, but I didn't hate them. Pitied them. They had traded a son who loved them for an image that destroyed them. I walked to the railing of my balcony. The sun was setting over Paris, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. I picked up my camera. My new Leica, paid for with my own salary, earned by my own talent. I looked through the viewfinder. I focused on a couple walking down the street below. They were arguing over a map, pointing in different directions but holding hands. It was real. It was imperfect. It was beautiful. Click. I captured the moment. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from Elena. Dinner at 8. I made reservations. And no, you are not allowed to pay. I smiled. I put the camera down. I am Joshua Dixon. I am not a fixer. I am not an ATM. I am not a backup plan. I am an artist. I am a man who built a life out of the ashes of a bridge I had to burn. And for the first time in 33 years, when I look in the mirror, I don't see a ghost. I see me. If you are reading this, if you have followed me from that humiliating dinner table in Boston to this balcony in Paris, I want to say thank you. But more importantly, I want to say something to you. My story is extreme, but the dynamic is common. Psychologists call it parentification or the scapegoat role. It's when a family system assigns the burden of responsibility to one child while giving the glory to another. It is a form of abuse that is quiet, insidious, and often disguised as duty or loyalty. Here is what I learned, and what I hope you take away. You are not a utility. Your worth is not measured by how useful you are to others. You are not rent to own. You are not a retirement plan. You are a human being with inherent value. No is a complete sentence. You do not owe anyone an explanation for protecting your peace. When I resigned, I didn't ask for permission. I took it. Blood is biology, not destiny. You cannot choose where you come from, but you can absolutely choose who stays in your life. Toxicity doesn't get a pass just because it shares your DNA. The truth will eventually win. My family built a castle on lies and appearances. I built a shack on truth. Their castle fell. My shack became a home. I know how hard it is to leave. I know the guilt that eats at you at 3 a.m. I know the fear that you will be alone. But look at me. I lost a family that never really loved me, and I found a world that does. If this story resonated with you, if you have ever felt like the invisible one, or if you have ever had to make the hard choice to choose yourself, I want to hear from you. Please, leave a comment below with your thoughts. Tell me, what is one boundary you need to set today to protect your own happiness? Or if you don't have the words right now, just comment good or I see you. Let me know that we are not alone. Let me know that we are seen. Thank you for watching. Take care of yourselves. You are worth it.